So this work, Accord with Tjentiste, features a performance or a series of performances at a spomenik, which is the Slavic word for monument, in southeastern Bosnia. I travelled there last year about the same time. It was winter, 2 degrees, or coming into winter really. And this was after a biennale in Ljubljana, where I had been performing also. They encouraged me to not try and find these spomeniks because it's a very sensitive history for a lot of people. They represent a battle, in particular, between the Yugoslav partisans and the Axis alliance in 1943. It's called the Battle of Tjentiste. And so that was a battle that was a significant loss on the Yugoslav partisan side, but it was also a stronghold for them in that the Axis alliance turned around. So 10,000 people were lost at this site. It's a pretty heavy sort of vibe there, but also really ethereal and magical. So I travelled there and I drove for 3,500 Ks over 3 days to find these, and then to drive back to Ljubljana, catch a plane to Berlin, which I missed, but not as a result of not driving fast enough. And I travelled alone and screamed. I guess I did performances a number of times, so 3 or 4 times. And they've now taken that footage back into this installation and created a single channel video work which deals with the image of the spomenik in the from a centre shot, and then me in the middle, and animating parts of that monument in a way that it's sort of it's sympathetic with the sounds that I'm making. Yeah, so in that I'm looking at ways of accessing sites, architecture, physical objects which carry weight of some sort. You know, this one in particular has this incredible sort of space age, early use of concrete aspect to it. And I want to engage with that or press against that and scream at it, or, you know, sort of create some pressure and see what comes out the other side, but also create some pressure on it in an aesthetic, digital sense, so making that transformer occur. In this show at Peloton, there's a single channel video work, which is the main project, but also in the back room there's a screen which is presenting one of the other performances of just one single side of the spomenik. It's a 30-second long project, and I'm just kind of starting to think about the process by which we're dealing with performance as a documented form. You know, like for me, the performance is the performance, and if I take some documentation from it, I want to turn that into a work itself, and I think that those two things need to be separate, and also the trace between them needs to be kind of evident. And I'm trying to use that digital process, or in After Effects at the moment, as that trace. So taking parts of keyframes, masks, colourful, totally strange sort of digital, errors and glitches, and applying that to the project as well as the performance. So it's a way of disturbing the process that I'm making with a computer, and then sort of creating a little bit of a corruption with my tactic, I guess. So I work mostly with performance and my voice, which is screaming, guttural, pops, bangs and whistles. Not in so much an extended vocal way, but like it's a combination of noise music, things like Masona and things like Dim Under Glass, and then also maybe a little bit of heavy metal, but I'm taking parts of those sorts of histories and then using them in my own way, which will be with an amplifier in a very focused, small amount of time, trying to feed into the amplifier and having that amplified feedback to me. So I'm really interested in direct line of signal or electricity, or whatever it is that we find we use to make those sorts of things happen. So it's really important in that process that I don't use any digital effects or anything to mediate it. That's a kind of an essential part of what I'm doing. And then from that core, I get other things happening. I get spatial reverberation, I get people responding, I get spaces responding. I always do a very similar sort of thing. I don't think that I respond to the space so much. It's much more of a totalitarianistic sort of approach where it's a creation of a sonic moment and there's a dome and I'm kind of in that, and what happens after that, the way that we listen to things afterwards is kind of an interesting thing for me. Like the bus will always be louder than me if I'm screaming on the street. But the way that we listen to the bus is different to the way we listen to a hysteric woman screaming on the street. And I've been doing that for about 5 years, and I'm now coming to a place where I'm really trying to investigate what it is that is remaining. Like, how do we kind of start to look at the effects of something and the responses that we kind of get. So through architecture is one of the ways I think about looking at it. But sound is the core sort of medium, really. I mean, sound is what is going to do anything if there's going to be anything done. So performance for me is about shifting the body outside of your normal experience of it. So I have to scream hard and fast to get to that place, and it's about pushing my voice as hard as I possibly can. And when I get there, I don't really remember anything that happens. I go black. I don't have a sense of performance, moment 1, 2, 3, and 4. It becomes that absolution, that sort of wall of white noise. And then you get clarity afterwards. And then there's all these people and you have to talk to the people. But yeah, that's really interesting for me. Like the concept of noise being everywhere, always, already. The full spectrum of sound and frequency response is so big, and we hear about this much of it. And what else is kind of going on out there? I'm interested in kind of finding a way to tap into that. But with what I have, I only have myself. I only have an amplifier and a pure sound wave converter and a car battery. Using very simple sorts of technologies to try and have maybe even a conceptual conversation with that. What I find really interesting in terms of that first point, that performance moment, I think about Michel Serres' idea of the Bell noise set, where the floor of noise is everywhere and we came from the sea and it's where we will return, and the idea of continually becoming and when I think about making these works, I don't necessarily think about screaming at people or screaming at a bus. I think about integrating with the system that is already there. Noise is everywhere.
Is it the sublime void? Is that what this thing is, which you stare into and then look back out of, and you kind of have this kind of cool, calm sense of?
No, I think that has just come out as a result of a practice which is about trying to promote action over stagnation and stasis. So going into a zone and taking an amplifier and screaming like that is probably, you know, it's very far away from the idea of getting a sense of personal meditation. I'm going there to actively disrupt and see what will happen. But I learned early on that nothing happens. What happens most likely is that people will ignore with it and not know how to deal with it. So that sense of absolution and that experience of the noise for myself is something that has come out as a result of that trying to shift a sonic zone with my body. Yeah.